Well, Mac never had any kind of immunity. You know, he got prosecuted for bank robbery, convicted of bank robbery, and went to prison and did his time. He was interviewed several times, but, you know, he didn't have anything. You know, he was doing what was in his best interest, which was to sit there and keep his own mouth shut instead of incriminate himself. So Mac really didn't have anything to do with the question you're asking. Perez, on the other hand, when he recognized how much trouble he was in for the theft of the cocaine and that type of stuff that he did on duty, he made an agreement with the district attorney's office. He said, I'll provide you with all this information in order to mitigate the damages that I'm facing. And so he did, but he made up a bunch of wild stories and threw a bunch of people under the bus that ultimately proved to be innocent. And you know, that was Perez's strategy, is to deflect the attention on him, put it on other people, and hope that that somehow will benefit his long-term goal, which is to get a lesser sentence. And we also have to talk about the difference between like a proffer agreement, self-incrimination protection versus immunity. These are completely different things. And so you know, those are important nuances and differences to understand when you're having these conversations. Keefe D had protection from self-incrimination. He had a proffer agreement. Teresa Swan, who confessed to the murder of Biggie, she had proper immunity. So these are just some differences that you have to understand when you're having these conversations that the general audience won't know these little nuances of law.
Right. So Perez never had any self-incrimination immunity? Sure,
he did once he made his agreement. But that's different than full immunity.
Okay.
Self-incrimination protection is different from immunity. Self-incrimination protection is like, I will have a conversation with you. I will tell you the things I've done, all the bad things I've done. You cannot use my own statements against me, right? Self-incrimination. Immunity is like, I'll tell you the bad things I've done, and you agree to never prosecute me on those things. That's different. See, if incrimination protection, it's like, I can tell you all the things I've done, you can't use that against me. But if 5 of the witnesses come forward and say, hey, we were there, Greg did it, we watched him, now you have the evidence to prosecute me, and you can. You just can't use my own statements. But I'm still subject to prosecution. Immunity says, no, you're not subject to prosecution, no matter who comes forward.
Right.
Get it? It's different.
Okay, so with that being said, to my original question, if he had anything to do with the Biggie murder.
It's a great point, and I get it now. If he had anything to do with the Biggie murder, that's the biggest card you have to play. If you're trying to get yourself out of trouble or make an agreement or, you know, really develop your relationship with the prosecution. It's like, you play your ace card, right? You don't play your B card, or your Queen of Hearts. You play that Ace of Spades.
Like someone put it to me, make sure whatever you got is bigger than what they got on you.
That's a good way of putting it.
Explain the Katz. What was his name? Steve Katz?
Steve Katz, yeah, Steven.
Because that name is still around as he was like hiding evidence.
Yeah, so Steve, he assumed responsibility for the investigation after Fred Miller, the primary investigator, retired. Of course, Poole had left the job long before that. Katz inherited the case. He was a robbery homicide investigator, as did Martin, and a lot of different people, you know, had their hands in this investigation prior to us getting involved in 2006. Steve had interviewed somebody, this Kenneth Bogney guy, which is this career criminal who was doing time and came up with this fantastic story about his relationship with Perez and these type of things, was interviewed. And of course, that's exculpatory information. You have to turn that over. So when those interviews take place, you get, back then it was a cassette tape, right? And then you book that cassette tape in multiple, there's a tracking number attached to it. He happened to have a copy of the tape in his drawer, but there's a tracking number attached to it. You look at the evidence photograph of that tape, and it's in its evidence box with tracking number. It means it's already got a number assigned to it. Well, they blew this out of proportion saying, look, Steve Katz is hiding evidence. He interviewed this guy, never turned it over. Well, if you go back and look at the discovery records of what was turned over to the plaintiffs, you see that tracking number, right? It was all a game of, it was a shell game by the plaintiffs' attorneys. Try to create the impression that the LAPD was involved in a cover-up. And Steve Katz became their fall guy, right? But of course, those claims about what Steve Katz did, about him withholding evidence, that was all exposed in court, showing that he didn't do anything wrong, that it was actually turned over. And then, but nobody wants to hear that. They only want to hear the juicy part about, you know, how bad of a guy he was when he was actually a really good guy.
There it is. Thank you very much. Any last words?
No, the bullshit continues.
Thank you very much.
Hey, again, guys, go to It's AGTV on YouTube. That's the homie. And he's got a great YouTube channel.